Hello everyone, my name is Paul and this is Gabby, our co-host tonight, and welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone's having a fantastic day. I hope that you, your family, and your friends are safe, and if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. There's been a ton of stuff that has happened over the last 48 hours, of course, as always, and we continue to watch what is happening regarding the country of Ukraine, which is our main story of the night. And generally speaking, when it comes to the news, there's usually not a lot of good things that are happening, a lot of rather terrible situations, in fact. And so, okay, Gabby, I'm going to put you down now. And so, the whole point of the channel here is to try and raise money and try and help people all over the world and try and help with as many different situations as we can. And so that is why here at the New News, we have dedicated ourselves to 100% being a nonprofit, meaning everything that we do here is to raise money to help people for all sorts of situations all across the globe, whether you're talking about Ukraine, you're talking about Syria, you're talking about Southeast Asia, you're talking about Africa, South America, North America. Wherever there are people to help, we are certainly going to do our best. And so if you check out the video description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizational links down there. All of them, 70% or more of the donations that they receive go directly to their programs, meaning they go directly to helping people, while 30% or less go to things such as administration's costs. We also do have our own initiative, which we started earlier this month, or this past month. And so what we are doing is we are trying to provide non-lethal military aid as well as medical supplies to those in Ukraine that need it. And the donation link is on our website and in the link in the description below if you're interested in trying to assist with that. We've already had a couple donations, so thank you guys. And I hope to continue seeing a lot of good things happen out of that here going forward as we have set up most logistical lines at this point. So thank you very much, everyone, for the support in the video description below. And if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. 100%. One of the things you can do is help us reach more people and expand our impact. Those likes and subscribes, sharing our content with on all their platforms, and to sharing it to those that really helps us a lot, and it brings more awareness to the situations on what's happening throughout the globe, and also gives other people the opportunity to get back as well. And so with those little bits of announcements over, if you are joining us tonight here in the live chat, hello Rooster, hello Max. I'm very happy to see everyone back here, of course, and I very much encourage you guys to go and jump into the live chat, say hello. And of course, if you have any questions as we go through the stream, to feel free and ask, and I will answer them to the very best of my ability. One of the things, so to give you a little bit of a background on myself, and some of my knowledge base. So I served in the Marine Corps between 2016 and 2020. I served as a 0352 anti-tank missileman and a corporal with 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines. During that time, I did 2 tours in the Middle East. My first tour between October of 2017 and March of 2018. I spent about a month and a half in Kuwait in transit, and a further 4.5 months in the country of Syria as part of Operation Inherent Resolve. And I was there mostly in Deir ez-Zor and Al-Hasaka provinces in the northeastern part of the country. Spent quite a bit of time there, made a lot of friends with the SDF and that kind of stuff. In fact, I still have one of their patches, and did a lot of stabilization efforts in combating the Islamic State there. Came back to the United States after that deployment, and we ended up going and running an armory personally for about a year and a half, working through that, running a bunch of logistics for the company before I redeployed between October of 2019 and March of 2020. This time, I spent most of my time in Kuwait. I was the Javelin team leader for the Crisis Response Company. After that, and as a result of that, actually, I went to the Baghdad Embassy complex on New Year's of 2020 as one of the 100 Marines that responded to the attack on the U.S. Embassy. There, I oversaw all anti-arm operations over the U.S. Embassy and, of course, assisted in securing it after the protesters attempted to break through the barriers. And then from there, I actually went back into Kuwait for a little bit before redeploying down to Saudi Arabia, where I trained Saudi Arabian Marines in the Red Sea as they were preparing to deploy as part of the Saudi contingent to Yemen. So I am a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armor doctrine. And commercially now, I do logistical coordination for a motor vehicle company. So a lot of logistics, a lot of infantry knowledge. But I am a subject matter expert in anti-armor warfare and armor doctrine. But I'm also a fully cross-trained machine gunner, a fully cross-trained rifleman, a partially cross-trained radio operator, as well as a CLS certified or Combat Lifesaver certified Marine, meaning I've received additional training on top of the standard tactical combat casualty care, so that way I could assist Navy corpsmen. And I do have real-world experience providing battlefield aid to casualties, mostly in my time in Syria. I'm also, of course, a logistical coordinator, meaning I am both a load planner and a dispatcher for a logistical company. And outside of that, I have a lot of interests. Interests in things like science, history, human geography, geopolitics, and the like, but I am no expert. So I always implore that you as a viewer, please do your own research. There is no substitute at all for doing your own research. Please go do that. Please stay informed. It is imperative that you do that. And so with that, we immediately jump down here and into the news, as there is quite a bit to go through. And we start off, of course, in the capital of Kyiv, and where we can see really the physical destruction in Ukraine. This has a couple of different things into it, but I thought the leading quote was really all we needed as a description to really tell you. And that is, quote, "Due to Russian military aggression, about 1,900 cities and villages in Ukraine need reconstruction." And that's coming from President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is the president of Ukraine. And we have a couple of supporting things to go along with this. Something we don't really talk about very often here is ecological damage. And this really should show you just the amount of destroyed structures in every part of the country. So this is coming from the Ministry of Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources. I apologize, everybody. And what they're showing here is the regional distribution of the number of destroyed or damaged housing objects per 1,000 units. So they have 2.4 thousand up here in Sumy, 7.7 thousand. Here in Chernihiv, 24,100 here in the Kyiv Oblast. And you can see as we continue here, 81,000 as we get over here in Donetsk, 11,000 in Luhansk. And it's just very, you can see just quite the amount of damage. I mean, they're talking per 1,000 units. These are entire villages getting wiped off the face of the earth. Some regions really don't have a lot of damage. Others have significant damage. And you can see how that has been scattered. And the UN kind of follows up with that of the relentless attacks on energy structures. So far, they have calculated between the UNDP as well as the World Bank comprehensive assessment have stated that due to the relentless attacks on energy infrastructure, they have over $10 billion USD in damages, with over 12 million people with that have no or limited electricity supply, which has also caused water and heating systems to be significantly disrupted. So you're talking about significant damage. You're talking about horrific amounts of very significant damage. Marshall Plan style need to rebuild Ukraine. And that's something that Ukraine's already been looking to. It's something that they have gone through. They went to Switzerland and proposed it. They've gone through all sorts of places and proposed how they plan on reconstructing Ukraine. There have already been dedications to reconstructing certain places. Part of that being, a lot of times, being medical facilities very specifically. We know that we have seen quite a bit of that. But overall, the war is not over, and so more damage is to come. But you can see, really, you start to get an idea of the level of destruction we have talked about. And when you're looking at the front lines, and you're looking at these cities that are so heavily embattled and destroyed, such as Bakhmut or Izium, or you're talking about Mariupol. I mean, these cities, keep in mind, these figures aren't completely accurate, because that doesn't include occupied areas, but these cities, I mean, people lived there. People's livelihoods were there. This is where someone, just like you do, going to work or school or whatever you happen to be doing in your normal life, going from a home to school or work, or, getting medical help at the hospital, none of that is an easy feat now. None of, hospitals alone, thousands have been damaged. Hundreds have been completely destroyed. The World Health Organization actually tracks this and continues to confirm it. And it's just absolutely horrific. There is no true normality to life anymore, which is a horrific thought. I mean, it is. You're looking at in these images oftentimes just the average. I mean, Bakhmut before the war, before June 4th of last year, for the most part was your normal everyday city, just like the town that you grew up in, just like the town that your parents lived in, just like, any other. The school was no different than yours, really. Where your parents worked was no different than where your parents work now. And now it is a very bloody slugfest of a battlefield. We immediately jump down here, leaving Kyiv, and we jump down into the Donetsk Oblast. This is here in the Donbass, where the vast majority of the fighting is ongoing. This is where the most kinetic activity along the entire front line is occurring. And what we do here is we start off usually with our daily Donetsk update, which comes from Pavel Kolenko, the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, also known as the governor of the Donetsk region. And he says, quote, on April 4th, number of victims of the Russian army in Donetsk Oblast increased by 4 killed, 11 injured. And we do get that graphic both in Ukrainian and in English coming through here. I apologize for the Doge as here when it comes to Twitter, as Elon Musk is continuing his campaign of market manipulation. And what we can see here is that in Lashchkin, 3 people were killed. I'm so sorry for butchering these. In Krasnohorivka, 1 person was killed, 7 injured in Bakhmut, 2 injured in Oshtertin, 1 injured in Turetsk, and 1 injured in Kiernik. And so far, since the beginning of the invasion, 1,454 civilians have been killed. These are only civilians, by the way. These are not battlefield casualties from troops. Meanwhile, 3,350 civilians have been injured, and this is only covering places that are currently unoccupied. These are only areas that are in Ukrainian-held territory, and so this does not include Volnovakha. This does not include the city of Donetsk, and this does not include Mariupol, where we know just from Maxar satellite footage alone, and just from the drone footage from single individual grave sites, that tens of thousands of people have been killed. Tens of thousands. This number doesn't even come close to the true number of people that have thus far been killed and wounded, forcefully deported, people that have been tortured, people that have gone missing and forced disappearances. Absolutely just horrific. Looking forward, he says, Twitter is very frustrating. Seems Ukrainian news is being buried. Not truly. One of the good things about what we do is we try to make it very organized in how we go through and do things. We categorize all of our sources by different regions and countries and what's going on there and importance. And we document what types of sources they are, as well as parts of other things in our vetting process to make sure that they are reliable sources. Being able to identify key figures in different areas. We have the personal Twitters, official government Twitters, OSINT Twitters. We have all sorts of things. And it's not just Twitters. We have massive amounts of like Telegram channels and stuff, that different avenues that, as a Westerner, we, usually go to Twitter for these kinds of things. It's a quick and easy reference, but believe it, if you're talking about Europe, Eastern Europe or the Middle East, most of the time you're actually going to be finding a lot more on Telegram than you are anywhere else. But highly do not recommend. But we actually maintain links to all of these things. So it's not something that can be buried. If something goes out or if a link ends up going missing, then we know, or its account is shut down, we will be able to tell pretty much instantly when that happens with our process. So it's not really being buried. It's more or less who you're surrounding yourself with on Twitter because of the algorithm. But it's also quite a lot of, you need to know where to look to get actual information. There's a lot of rumors, a lot of charity fraud, a lot of really terrible things that have come about of this war. A lot of people talking about, well, this is happening or this is happening, and not really having an actual depiction of what's happening in this war. It's very one-sided, and so it can be very difficult to truly, give an idea without doing something like this. You have to really dedicate much more time and energy to this than the average person's willing to be willing to get accurate, up-to-date information on a situation. So I apologize for kind of that little tangent, but it's worth talking about how we do things around here. Transparency is very important to me, which is why we even release our expenditure reports and stuff, even though we don't really need to. But transparency is very important for me and for us as like an organization. And so letting people know and seeing like our sources and stuff, I think it's important. I think it's valuable. In fact, I'll even do it one better. So for those that have not seen this, I have shown this before, but it's been a very long time. So this is actually our sources spreadsheet. For those that might be interested. So this is our sources spreadsheet. We have broken down. You can see down here at the bottom quite a lot of different things over here. But you can see we have, you know, the source name, whatever it is. We have here the source URL, what type of source it is, the keys over here. When we added that source and a short description of that source. And this is the international one. This is the one for Ukraine. We have one for, and these scroll quite significantly. Ukraine, Russia, Europe, the Middle East is rather short, unfortunately. Asia Pacific, Africa, South and Central America, North America, so that includes both the US and Canada. And then there's a section for technical documents, which despite all this time using this, I haven't actually updated, so I apologize. Because I actually have most of the technical documents. But you can see, you know, especially when you're talking about the war in Ukraine, it's important to look at both sides. And we understand that. As much as we do have a bias, I do look at both sides. Like, I have the Kremlin on here. I have Sputnik. I have the State Duma. And not only if I go to the State Duma, I can also go to their social media links if it would like to redirect here. Yeah, so I can go to their social media links, and I can actually go to their VK page. And I can see exactly what they're saying here. And we do have an in-house translator, so I can see these translations or whatever, but I can also get them verified, which helps. Speaking of our in-house translator, hello, Fair. So, I hope that kind of gives you a little bit of a better idea to our process here and kind of what we're looking at when we're going through and doing this stuff to find the news for you. Because I think it's kind of important to understand, you know, how accurate is something and how much someone should trying to do to be accurate. We actually continue here in the de facto head of the government here in the Donetsk region, and that is here in Kramatorsk, where we have something a little bit different that has happened here. Emergency crews are currently working to rescue people in flooded neighborhoods after a sluice gate, which is a hydraulic gate that you most of the time find at dams or locks, failed along the Krasny-Touretsk River, which runs through Kramatorsk. According to Pavlikolenko, roughly 30 streets and about 260 homes in total were flooded, and so far 17 people have been evacuated from the area. Engineers have already devised a plan to go ahead and put a new concrete barrier in there to prevent further flooding. They do have several photos here coming from Pavlikolenko and also the Ministry of Internal Affairs, who runs the emergency crews. You can see where here along the riverfront, you can see where that lock ended up failing. Ended up letting a lot of water into these lower areas and flooding out this area. Fair says hello from New Orleans. Hello. Hope you're enjoying the U.S. It's always fun. Not really. There's a lot of times that it is not very fun. And so, as you can see, the flooding is pretty bad, but it's not, you know, it's about, you know, knee to thigh deep. But when you're talking about a lot of people that are still in these areas, you can break them down into two major groups, and that is people that are refusing to leave, which is the ones that are a little bit younger can actually leave on their own, but they just refuse to. The others are those that can't leave, which is the elderly, which is where you see significantly more of the danger coming from for these types of floods. You see even dogs coming out and getting rescued. But the Ministry of Internal Affairs runs all of the Ukrainian emergency services. So this is actually from one of the rescuers, coming from Anton Jeroshenko.
Сейчас поможем, не переживай! Все, выходим. Соседи еще. На меня вот так вот, на это. Так. Тоже как-то на плечо. Собака? А там есть еще кто-то?
So as you can see, a lot of elderly and a lot of young children. So vulnerable groups that wouldn't necessarily be able to leave on their own. Fair chiming in regarding my saying I hope that you're enjoying the U.S. Fair has stated, oh man, one thing, U.S. food is superior to Canada. We eat Play-Doh compared to the States. Your Commonwealth of the United Kingdom and those people still eat like it's the Blitz. The United Kingdom invaded half of the world for spices and didn't bother to use any of them. The one thing Canada has on about anybody is poutine. That's it. That's it. That's the only claim to fame I can think of Canada when it comes to food. Overall, the South knows what they're doing. Food-wise, yes. I am 100% for barbecue. I love a good barbecue. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of good barbecue places around where I live. But I have a favorite restaurant. And it is a barbecue place. So, yeah. Yeah, food's great. Plus, you can't pass up a good American burger. That's another good thing. I love my burgers. Now, getting back into the serious stuff here. And we come down here. This is in Alexeyevo, Druskivka. And unfortunately, 2 people were killed and 4 were injured after Russian shelling hit the city. And they were killed after it ended up striking around residential homes around the city. There is unexploded munitions there, so currently EOD and sapper teams have begun to clear those unexploded munitions left over from just that strike. See some of the damage here, once again coming from Pavlo Kolenko. That brings us finally over to Bakhmut, where there's quite a bit here to talk about. So, Ukrainian forces are continuing to battle Russian troops in the city of Bakhmut. And for 306 continuous days since we first reported it on June the 4th, the brutal battle has accrued the lives of thousands, with tens of thousands more being wounded. And house-to-house fighting in the ruins of the city have turned the battles from trench warfare and fields littered with bodies to very grueling combat in homes and apartments of the city's former residents. And there are city residents that do actually remain, but most of them, they're inside of their basements. They're using them like bomb shelters, just awaiting and trying to survive the onslaught of Russian troops and their ferocious indiscriminate bombardments that we're seeing against the city. Media blackout over the last several weeks has meant that there is very little information coming out, citing it was imposed for operational security purposes, as well as the fact that the situation around the city is generally very grim, and the picture that we are depicted is very grim as well. It holds, but it is tense and it is difficult. And so it very much remains unclear. The situation around the city remains very much unclear. Outside of basic descriptions of brutal combat and urban warfare, there is no real way to determine how the Battle of Bakhmut is going. There's been certain instances of people geolocating things to certain areas, and that helps to certain extents. However, that doesn't mean a counterattack didn't come through shortly afterwards, and just having geolocated footage doesn't necessarily mean that it's accurate as to where their troop locations are, because that attack could have also failed. These situations are very fluid, it's very difficult, and a very developing situation that isn't something that's easily described or portrayed on any kind of map. It's very messy, it's very brutal, it's very up close, and it's very personal, and it's not something you can decipher from half a world away. So, we continue to release more and more footage, whatever we are finding from the Battle of Bakhmut here, but of course, the map is not changing, and the map is not changing even with the geolocated stuff that we have found, because of, one, operational security, two, because of questionable accuracy in the information. So until we have more, we are requesting, or we are not going to be able to change the map, nor are we going to be doing anything here outside of just reporting on the battle itself. Now, we do have quite a bit of footage coming out of Bakhmut tonight, at least, and so you can get an idea. We can see here, these are YPR 765s around Bakhmut. Take a look.
Нет, за нами идет. За нами, да. Два еще. Или один, или...
Something interesting to know here that is kind of interesting for me is if you look at the makeup of the units here. And so if we're looking at this, of course I'm pretty sure I've just broke it. If we're looking at this, I did just break it, didn't I? I am so sorry. Mute that. So what we can determine from this, and this is why there's an operational silence around here, is because of stuff like this. You don't want this information getting out. And the reason, obviously this has been posted publicly, I almost guarantee that the Russians have seen it, because I've seen it in about like 6 different places now. So loose lips sink ships, and the reason why operational security is so important is because of what we see here. This is someone who has filmed this video, and what we can tell is this unit reportedly moving towards Bakhmut has 1 tank platoon. So we know that they have 1 tank platoon, because based on Soviet doctrine, which is what the Ukrainian forces at the beginning of the war and through their tank usage have been utilizing, is Soviet makeup, Soviet unit makeup. 1 tank platoon for the Soviets and the Russians is 3 tanks. The Americans is 4, as well as most NATO countries, but their version of a tank platoon is 3 tanks. 1 lead tank, as well as 2 assists. These, as Bookham is asking, are these M113s? No, these appear to be YPR 765s. These are a Turkish these are a Turkish armor personnel carrier. It is based on the design of the M113, much like the Oh, crap. I can't think of it now. It's not the Warrior. Warrior's an armored personnel carrier. Oh, crap. Alright, book of knowledge time. Actually, the YPR 765 actually doesn't appear in my book of knowledge, interestingly enough. Because it's so similar to the M113. The Warrior's closer to Bradley. Give me armored personnel carrier. APC, damn it. That one. FE432, which is the British version of the M113. And it is actually distinct in its look. JL says it might be leaked on purpose to our old video to be published. Yes, but the point of it is that, you know, even there is a delay in information. We can almost guarantee that there's a delay in information, anywhere from 12 to 72 hours, depending on it. It could actually be even longer. But what we see here is pretty consistent with what we've seen at around this period. The most of the snow has actually melted. That heavy snow has melted in many areas. And we're back to the kind of like Raspatita mud, which you're starting to really see there. But once again, it was just really cold, so it's a little bit softened up, or a little bit still hardened. But operational security, we have 1 tank, 2 tank, 3 tanks. Okay, 3 tanks. These tell me that these are all T-series tanks. Tells me they're equal to whatever tanks the Russians are fielding, and it's 1 platoon of tanks. Secondly, we have YPRs. 1, 2, and 3 YPRs. 1, 2, and 3. There's the last one in there. So that tells me that is roughly 1 platoon of infantry in 2 sections, broken up between 2 sections of armor personnel carriers. Well, the M113 has been around long enough, you can assume the YPR 765 has very similar ratings to it. Book of 40 says old school identification. Flags. Yeah, in some cases. We see at least 1 Ukrainian tank usually per platoon carrying a flag, if not 1 per at least convoy or company. But we have here is a reinforced, I would say, a company minus, platoon plus of troops. YPR is probably going to carry between 6 and 8 guys in the back. That tells me roughly 3 trucks, 3 Vics, you know, 6 to 8 guys per vehicle. Tells me a reinforced platoon of infantry, depending on their infantry platoon sizes, usually ranges between 30 to 40, broken up into 2 squads, which 3 vehicle units. That can be done when it comes to sections for armored, for mobile warfare, mechanized and motorized warfare, which is what I did in the Marine Corps. So anyone that has some knowledge in this stuff can start to identify, based off of what you're seeing, the condition of forces and the amount of forces and how many troops are going into this area, what they're doing, how they're doing it, what they're bringing to bear with them. You know, clear down to those personal videos of, you know, if you take enough time to look at them and you know, are actually trying to observe things, you can see how many grenades does he have in his grenade pouches? How many magazines is he carrying? Is he carrying a bag? Is he not carrying a bag? Does his buddy have back plates, front plates, or both? Does he have side sappies? Does his uniform look really tattered? Does his stuff look rusted? Does it look bad, you know, in poor condition? Does something seem broken? You know, are they carrying a drone? Does anyone have a drone set up with them? You know, these things, small details like this, the devil's is in the details, but things like this are what help intelligence communities be able to identify the state of forces. So it's very important. This is why operational security is important. Why you don't necessarily want to show immediately after the fact a convoy rolling down a highway. Because I can now identify however many vehicles are in front of you, what types of vehicles they are, and know their and if you know their capabilities of what that type of vehicle is likely going to be able to carry based on its size and its design basis, then you can guesstimate within a fair amount of accuracy the size of the force coming at you and what they're bringing to the fight, which is really helpful if you're trying to counter that. Armored personnel carriers, generally speaking, only have 12 to 25 millimeters of armor. Not particularly thick. So that means any kind of single charge RPG warhead will be able to take out any of the YPRs. They are carrying single turret 50 caliber machine guns. It's a lot of machine gun power. So, but there's only one turret. And there's only one optic, and there's only one person able to see really outside the vehicle, and that is the guy operating the gun. So it's going to be very easy to outmaneuver those vehicles. They're carrying X amount of guys inside of them. That's a video I just showed. I apologize. BMP here. Look, there's a fighting position here. Once again, reiterating my point. And so by showing this road, we can now identify where they have a checkpoint or a fighting position specifically, and what road, because you saw another truck using that road, what road, one of these main roads that they're using for a supply route. That's clear enough for them to move supplies easily through. That isn't cratered.
Мені починає здаватись, що Бахмут тягне з мене прикол. Зараз покажу. Проспект Свободи, єбана в рот. Мені починає здаватись.
Ебать. Ебало нахуй. Вот это уебало нахуй. Ебать. Ебало нахуй. Вот это уебало нахуй.
За нашими спинами прильоти.
That video was an absolute perfect show of a saturation bombardment, by the way. I keep hitting the wrong thing. I apologize. Oh, there we go. There's another one. You know, there's not precision in this. And you're talking about they're using these on the entire city. So this type of bombardment against the entirety of the city is pretty significant. And it causes a lot of devastation that is just unnecessary even in modern warfare. Blue 40 says, I know it's Bakhmut and it's big, but it seems too quiet for close-in battle. Sound works differently in a city, I think is worth noting. You know, if you're fighting in an open area, you can hear gunfire from a pretty good distance, which is, you know, it's kind of eerie to hear it like that. But when you're fighting, in like an open area or you're in an open area and someone's firing a weapon, like you can hear it from, you know, kilometers away. Using the metric system for my European friends, but you can hear it for forever. I mean, it's really a really good distance. But when you're talking about a city like this, and especially considering all the high-rise apartment buildings, especially near downtown, these act as a barrier, and it makes it very difficult to hear what's going on. And when there's a battle like this, and you're talking about massive amounts of artillery usage and stuff like that. One, there's a media blackout. Once again, OPSEC, so you don't want to show exactly where Ukrainians are right up at the front. The front, you know, sitting there, you know, house across the streets occupied by the enemy, and you're in the one, you know, on the other side. They're not going to show that, really. But if you've noticed with a lot of the battles that we have seen, you know, think about how massive the battle for Mariupol was, and outside of the gunfire that you heard in those immediate videos, you really didn't hear any other gunfire around that area, if that makes sense. You didn't really hear the rest of the gunfire happening in the city, and that's because it's a lot of small engagements there, and it's how, I don't know how to describe it other than it just deflects. I mean, the buildings are deflecting a massive amount of the sound that is traveling. It doesn't travel as far. It's very interesting. Johnny Wishbone asks, at battalion level, what % of losses is considered battle ineffective for Russia? Is it similar to NATO? I do not know. I do not know. I would assume it has changed significantly since the beginning of the war. JL asked if the rocket it didn't explode. I think it buried itself in the ground. Once again, it's Rasputitsa season. Lots of unexploded munitions getting ready to happen. But getting back to Johnny Wishbone, at the battalion level, you're gonna see. I mean, the thing with the Russians is that, unlike what we've seen from Ukraine, because Ukraine, its structure is still maintained rather similarly to that of the Soviets and the Russians. Structurally, their sizes are rather similar, and their makeup is rather similar. So it's a little bit of a better comparison than with NATO. But for NATO, a battalion is considered really combat ineffective when it's taken a company or more of casualties, dependent on the situation. But if the unit takes roughly a company or more of casualties, it's no longer considered to be combat effective and is rotated at home early. That actually happened to my grand seniors in 2-7, that we had that situation. They had to be rotated home, or my great grand seniors. But regardless, 279 had to be rotated home early because they took over 200 casualties, which is about a company, and you can't do that. That's during the war in Afghanistan. So that rotated home. In a full-fledged, near peer conflict, that threshold of what is considered to be acceptable versus unacceptable casualties is going to dramatically increase. With the U.S. and NATO and Ukraine, those units that are considered to be rendered combat ineffective will then be rotated back most of the time. Situation permitting. I mean, everything is situationally dependent on these things, but the Russians, we assume that there is some kind of rotation for forces, because we've seen videos of guys, that have been rotating, they're in, a secondary line or whatever, but they're not in the main line anymore, but they were. So we assume that there is some kind of rotation, but that overall their battalions are really on the front line until they are essentially destroyed. So at the beginning of the war, they took about 50% casualties before they were rendered combat ineffective. And they have then taken these, at the time, BTGs, battalion tactical groups, and then smash them together, 50% with 50%, make it 100% or 89% or whatever percentage of a full unit they were going to have. But those units weren't coherent units. They weren't integrated very well with each other, because they were literally taking two units and smashing them together in the middle of a war zone, which, generally speaking, it's a temporary fix, but it's not a permanent one. And so they tried to then re-engage these units later and found out that they were not going to operate so effectively because their units had different SOPs and everything else. They didn't communicate. They weren't cohesive units. The Russians at this point are no longer really deploying them as battalion tactical groups, because they simply can't maintain the logistical capacity for it, and they also have seen such a high attrition rate that their BTGs that they deployed with, which is about 15 at the beginning of the war, were pretty much completely and utterly annihilated. The 7th Air Assault Corps is almost completely gone. The 7th Air Assault Regiment's, been obliterated. Pretty much the entirety of the VDV has been obliterated as a military force. And it really exists only in name and some higher command structure. Cohesively, they don't exist anymore. Then we finally saw some action with whatever remnants of units they could scrape together taking place up here in Luhansk earlier. But since this small counteroffensive, which failed, we really haven't seen anything, and it's kind of formed into a stalemate there. So I would say that Russians don't really consider battle and effectiveness. But I would say at a minimum, if I was a Russian commander, I would, in this situation, in this type of warfare, I would probably consider a unit combat ineffective after about a 20% casualty rate, a 20 to 25% casualty rate, so about 1 in 4, 1 in 5, because of the war of attrition. And because of the high rate of casualties that we're seeing, and because of the lack of equipment and suitable equipment for the task at hand. Obviously, Russian commanders aren't thinking about that, and there's a really big difference in mentality at the I was never formally trained at the strategic level, so please take all of this with a grain of salt. But at the tactical level, when you're looking at these kinds of situations and you're dealing with these kinds of situations, the difficulty in trying to understand when you're considered no longer effective in your role is a very difficult line to cross and a very difficult threshold to understand. Because I have had times where I was 100% not, I was definitely either in the yellow or red on effectiveness at certain points in my career. And I continually said, yeah, I'm green, like I'm good. But another key factor is that on the tactical level, for the United States and NATO, generally speaking, we have the ability to take initiative, which allows for a lot of wonderful things to occur on the battlefield and within the battle space, and it lets me take charge of the situation. The Russians are very top-down heavy, instead of us really building a strong NCO corps and then a small officer corps to oversee and provide oversight and, you know, get the arrow in the right direction. The Russians are very much top-down heavy, and so their command structure is mainly focused on lots of officer involvement, which does in a very much a strict obedience to the orders they're given. So these units, at a certain point, they are fighting and fighting and fighting, and when they're first thrown into the fray, you'll see some initial gains, but as they take heavier and heavier losses and aren't rotated out, you're seeing them basically becoming less and less effective throughout the duration. And instead of putting in, you know, rotating those troops out and putting in a fresh unit, the Russians are keeping that unit there and then smashing another one on top of them and saying that they should all go. And then you're seeing some very very small gains, maybe, if everything goes well with that new unit plus whoever's left of the old one. And then once again, you start hitting a brick wall again. So that's why you're not seeing a lot of major gains anywhere. It's a lack of manpower. It's a lack of initiative on the battlefield. It's a lack of troop rotation, which has completely demoralized their forces, made all of their units essentially combat ineffective, and are no longer deployed within the Russian doctrine. So that is kind of my overall assessment to the unit effectiveness, combat effectiveness of these units at the battalion level. But you're not really seeing them deployed anymore at the battalion level. You should be looking more at combat effectiveness at the platoon and company level more so than the battalion, because the battalions cohesively as units are really only existent in name only, from at least the best assessments that I can make and through my personal opinion of the situation. So I hope that answers your very well thought out question. That was a very good question. That was a very, very good question. It's a very interesting one. So, short answer though, 20 to 25% is what should be considered acceptable losses, but you're really not seeing a cap on it. Probably along the lines of an 80% casualty rate is probably finally when a unit is rotated out. Book of 40 says it'll be interesting when Ukraine attacks what their threshold of casualties they can bear. Probably depends on the situation, though. I think there's a caveat that has been put into every doctrine ever made for the United States, and that is situation dictates. I have heard that word so often. I've heard that phrase, I should say, so often it's impossible to even... that will be just stuck in my mind of this is all, you know, this is, we'll do this, and this situation dictating. Because at the end of the day, the enemy gets a say. But your situation, your situation does dictate. If we weren't fighting, the Taliban in Afghanistan, and we were fighting the Russians or the Chinese or somebody, I'm sure 2-7, well, one, there would have been a lot more units in Afghanistan, and two, 2-7 probably wouldn't have been rotated home early at a company's loss, at 212 casualties, I think is what 2-7 took that deployment. Like that. Yeah, it's a company, which is huge. I mean, that's a lot of people, but you still have H&S company, which can be then formed into a line company, which has actually happened before. It actually happened on my second deployment. We formed them into a line company. You also have weapons company, which is dished out. They can be reconstituted and pull into the line as a full company, full strength company. You have two other line companies, and that's just a Marine Infantry battalion. So that's, should kind of give you a good idea as to, there's a lot that can go into that. That doesn't include any attachments you may have gotten for the mission, because generally speaking, you're going to be attached. You're going to have units attached to you, combat engineers, logistical support, armor, UAVs, intelligence, all sorts of things, special operations forces. So, there's a lot of things that can be done. It really depends on the situation. Afghanistan 2012, bad situation. but not worth completely annihilating an infantry unit. Costs too much money to train those guys. It costs too much money to pay out in the whole life insurance thing, the SGLI. So we're just going to kick that, and we're just going to rotate a fresh unit in there and let them have at it. So first, flip that in same exact unit, 2-7, and look at this last stand of Fox Hill at the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir. Yeah. So, yeah. So look at 2-7, 2012 Afghanistan, 2008, 2012 Afghanistan, and then you look at the Fox Company and the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir, and you get that whole situation dictates what's considered acceptable losses. Finally, wrapping up Ukraine tonight, we jumped down here to Odessa, where 14 out of 17 drones were down. This is coming from Operational Command South, but we covered initially a little bit of information coming out of Odessa of a couple of recent drone strikes that were happening pretty much about the time that we actually went live. Quote, on April 4th, 2023, Russian forces attacked Ukraine from the south with Iranian-made Shahed 136, 131 drones. Air Force and Armed Forces of Ukraine of the Operational Command South shot down 14 enemy UAVs out of 17. That's coming from the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Let's move into the international news here. We jump up here into Moscow with the Ministry of Suspicious Fires, because the Russian Ministry of Defense in Moscow is currently on fire. A fire, once again started at unknown causes, was spotted in the Russian Ministry of Defense right there in downtown Moscow by the Kremlin. This continues the endless stream of unknown fires at government and logistical locations across Russia. These include warehouses, chemical plants, military and government buildings, including government-backed universities, as well as oil and gas lines and gas facilities all throughout the country. And these continue every day. It is insane how many suspicious fires have been occurring in Russia over the last 6 months. If I was to report on suspicious fires that have happened over the last 48 hours, we would spend a solid 2 hours in Russia. Hands down. Would spend about 2 continuous hours in Russia. So that brings us over here and into Poland, where Warsaw welcomes President Zelensky. So President Zelensky and Olena Zelenska, the First Lady of Ukraine, met with President Andrzej Duda as well as First Lady Agata Kornhauser-Duda, as well as crowds of supportive Poles in Warsaw, speaking at length regarding their deepening ties, close cooperation, and Poland's unwavering support for Ukraine since the start of the invasion last year. The president and his wife went on to visit refugee centers in the city, speak to crowds gathered in Warsaw, and pay their respects to the 1944 memorial dedicated to the Warsaw Uprising. There is a good photo shortly after President Zelensky's arrival.
Дякуємо. Слава Україні! Хочу подякувати вам за те, що ви тут, за те, що підтримували Україну, підтримували українців. Я бажаю нам всім
So pretty awesome, huh? JL says I watched it live. It was cool. Video from Elena ZELENSKY. Just a lot of short videos coming out of this tonight. And you can see coming out here both of the staffs. Visiting of the 1944 memorial.
Мені дуже приємно мати можливість відвідати сьогодні такий чудовий музей. Я дякую всім працівникам музею, дякую вам, пане директоре, за те, що ви в такій чудовій манері зберігаєте історію, величну історію, героїчну історію свого народу. Дуже важливо нам зараз, коли ми переживаємо страшні часи російської навали, доторкатись до таких історій, як історія Варшавського повстання 44-го року. Тому я дуже дякую, що створений повний аудіогід для українських відвідувачів, україномовних відвідувачів, які зможуть доторкнутися так само, як і я, до вашої історії рідною мовою. Я впевнена, що те, як ми зберігаємо власну історію, робить нас людьми, які пам'ятають свої сторінки і можуть дійсно щиро відчути історію братніх народів, яким для нас є, безперечно, польський народ. Я також хочу подякувати нашому посольству в Польщі і особисто пану Зваричу, Василю Богдановичу. Дуже приємно чути саме його голос. Це дійсно унікальна подія, коли посол власною персоною озвучує аудіогід для українців.
So another pretty awesome video there. Let's see what else we got. That's the same one. I'm sorry if I keep clicking the same links, guys. I apologize. There's them visiting one of the Ukrainian refugee centers. You can see the crowd out there. So pretty amazing overall. Pretty good, awesome visit. I would say there's the United States throws a lot of money, into this. It puts a lot of support into this for good reason. I mean, and there's many reasons depending on how you want to look at it. For doing so. But I think personally, the closest ties between any two nations, while Ukraine has formed a lot of close ties, I would say none are closer than that of Ukraine and Poland. Ukraine and Poland have a national bond to each other, very similar histories, very long similar histories. Poland, for a long time, did not actually exist. So Poland, because of the Russians, didn't exist. There's several different events called the partitioning of Poland that breaks Poland up into several different areas, and is then annexed by the Imperial Russia as it slowly loses stability during the times of the Poland-Lithuania. There's just a lot of history into it. A lot more than I can go into on this channel. A lot more than I obviously know, because it would take many lifetimes to study all of this. But Poland and Ukraine have very similar histories. You went through very similar experiences, especially following the Second World War, and during and following the Second World War. And they've been close allies and close friends for a long time now. And their ties, Poland has done an exceptional job of support. They have provided an immense amount of support to Ukrainians that have fled the country. They have provided an immense amount of military support for Ukrainian armed forces, continue to do so. So much logistical support, so much support for non-profit organizations and NGOs and stuff trying to support Ukraine. Poland has taken the vast majority of the refugees from Ukraine. So it's been an exceptional journey, and it's been you cannot quite describe how close these two countries are. It's pretty amazing to watch. And it's, I think it's very fitting that Zelensky goes to Warsaw to visit. Interesting topic coming out of Dublin. Ireland is going to consult the public on maintaining military neutrality. Ireland's government is to ask the public for their views on the country's tradition of military neutrality in a consultative forum, the foreign minister said on Wednesday. Foreign Minister Michael Martin said the forum, which will be held in June in three different cities over 4 days, will focus on a range of security issues and allow for a discussion on the decades-old neutrality policy. Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar last year said the country was likely to reconsider the policy in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and suggested the country might get more involved in common European Union defense policy. So that's very interesting. If you notice, Ireland kind of sits on the sidelines in the rest of Europe. There's a multitude of reasons for that. That also has a very long history in and of itself, but Ireland kind of sits on the sidelines of Europe for a lot of what is happening here. And they have maintained neutrality for a lot of things. They're also very much... they've had a lot of internal issues, especially over up about 2010, the 90s and 2000, the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s during the Troubles. A lot of internal issues that they really preferred to deal with, and they also assisted in UN missions, so providing forces for UN peacekeepers. But outside of that, they try to maintain some kind of neutrality, and they try to maintain a very, middle of the road mentality when it comes to militarily supporting anybody in their foreign policy, which is why you get certain individuals really coming to the forefront, and they happen to be Irish. Because that is kind of where that has led to in some cases. And so we see Ireland starting to try and shift that. They are trying to get onto the footing of Europe in some cases, and it will depend on what the public believes in, which is the right thing to do. I think a forum on determining how do you not how do I, but how do you, as the people of Ireland, feel about, this issue? I think it's a very important step if you're trying to, conduct foreign policy. I think it's a very important step to be able to do that. Judge Brooks says, imagine being a Russian submarine trying to get out into the Atlantic now. The amount of escort you would have to have is retarded. A Russian submariner in Kaliningrad couldn't pick his nose without NATO knowing. It's dumb. It's really dumb. The amount of now security of the North Sea and the Baltic Sea, Russia has no claim anymore. Russia's claim is about to here. It's done, because the rest of it's all NATO waters and international waters. Just because Finland's now part of NATO and Sweden's a contender, but they also have been a cooperator with NATO for a long time. We jump down here and into Jerusalem, where Israel continues the attack on Al-Aqsa Mosque. Israeli forces once again tried to take control of Al-Aqsa Mosque, expelling parishioners from it. Israeli police detained more than 400 Palestinians in the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex. Security forces broke into the building and beat parishioners with batons and rifles using tear gas and stun grenades. More than 100 people were injured. These are called human rights violations. Yep. After the storming of Al-Aqsa Mosque by the Israeli security forces, riots broke out in some parts of the country, organized by local Palestinians outraged by what had happened. There were several rockets were launched in the Gaza Strip in the direction of Israel, but were shot down by the missile defense system. And in response, the Israeli Air Force launched strikes on territories controlled by Palestinian formations. Which I think is a good time to make a point about Israel. The reasoning behind the creation of Israel is a very noble one. Right? Because of what had happened. Because of everything that has continued to be happening. Especially against the Jewish people. I think it's a good decision. I think it's a good decision for them to have their own area. Especially one that is considered their Holy Land, which is fine. I don't have a problem with that. That's a UN issue that was dealt with in 1948, the creation. I understand that there is some... I understand that there have been a lot of things that have happened because of Israel. That there is some resentment against, especially pretty much every Arab country around them, because of the multiple wars they have had to fight to be prevented from being entirely wiped out as a country. That's understandable. Being, vast majority of the population being a single religion. Not a theocracy as a country, but mostly being, a driven, Judaic country. And having that separation from their neighbors. That's okay. What is not okay is thinking that because of the horrific events of the Holocaust, you can continue to violate human rights on a massive scale. My mentality as an individual is not one hard to understand. Okay? My mentality as an individual is called people should be treated like people. It's crazy that I would think like that. I know, right? Discrimination? Why? Human rights violations? Why? I don't care who you are, where you're from, what you look like, or who or what you want to call God, goddess, or whatever you want to believe in your personal time. I do not care at all. I do not care about any of these things. Never have. Never has bothered me. Israel and Palestine are two nations. Look at the charter. Look at the treaty at the creation of Israel. Israel and Palestine are two nations. They are two countries. Not one, they are two countries. On Google Maps, what do you see here? Israel. They are two countries. There's two of them. Israel and Palestine. Two countries, doesn't mean that Israel gets to invade Palestine and put up settlers. You don't get to do that. That's called sovereign, integrity. The whole issue, the whole thing of things being said about the invasion by Russia into Ukraine. It's crazy. That goes for everybody. Territorial integrity. By the treaty that establishes the country of Israel in 1948, they are two nations with an international zone. Get this, an international zone in Israel or in Jerusalem, because it's a holy site for about everybody. Doesn't matter what faith you have, there is likely a holy site in Jerusalem for you. It is an international city. By the treaty. Which is why Tel Aviv and not Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. hence the districts of Jerusalem. That was never fully implemented, nor has it ever been enforced properly. You can't settle another nation's territory. You cannot have unilateral agreements to do so. You cannot just randomly invade and raid another territory. You cannot beat people because of their religion. You can't go and you just can't go and attack mosques. It's not okay. It's never been okay to do these things. Like in the modern 21st century, when has it ever been okay to just do these things? Never. There is no small timing. This happened earlier, by the way. We've covered this before. There is at no point in a counterterrorism or counterinsurgency operation going after 4 guys should you incur over 100 casualties. That is called purposefully attacking civilians. You do not get to beat people with batons. In, get this, their own country. Do not have to believe me. Go read the treaty from 1948. It's on the UN website. I get it. Israel is a very powerful ally for the United States. That's fine. I have no problem being Israel's ally as long as they treat people like people. And if they can't do these things, and if they can't get along, then it blows my mind that you don't put a bunch of peacekeepers there and didn't do it 4 decades ago. Like, oh, I don't know. Let's think of other countries that have had this happen. I don't know. How about you, Haiti and Dominican Republic? You don't happen to have a bunch of UN troops that are just stationed on the border because you two can't get along, do you? I can't think how a 2-state solution couldn't work without any kind of, tense situation that the UN could possibly resolve in some general sense of the word. I have no idea how that could happen. It's not a hard concept, guys. It really isn't. Treat people like people. Don't, go randomly killing people. Don't invade other people's countries. Don't hate on people for their religion or their views or what have you. That's fine. People are allowed to have their opinion. They're entitled to it. There's a right there's literally a charter of human rights. It's fine. Don't violate them. Just for any country. I don't care what country. I don't care, if it was, as the United States. As a nation, we have violated so many rights. Now, I was thinking about this earlier, going through this. I was sitting there, and I was actually, going through wonderful shower thoughts, I know. But I was sitting there, I was like, if I was president of the United States, you want to know one of the biggest things I would push for? As president of the United States, I think one of the biggest things I would push for is the United States to sign and ratify a shit ton of international treaties of the United Nations. Like becoming a part of the International Criminal Court. So, why? Because if you're going to support the law, like the United States, saying how it supports the International Criminal Court's, decision and all these things, great. If you're going to support these decisions, if you're going to support the international law, you should not try to remain above it. So what is the United States scared of if it will not sign and ratify the 1993 Rome Statute to establish the International Criminal Court. Why isn't any country willing to go to Israel and be willing to say, I will cut all like defense ties with Israel if it does not stop oppressing people? Like, I will cut all like investment. I will sanction Israel if it does not stop oppressing people. Or move to another one. You know, I know we're talking about Israel here. India. If the Hindu majority government of India does not stop oppressing the Muslim minority population of India and demolishing their homes and killing their people, we will sanction the hell out of them. I will cut all defensive ties with them. There will be no more defensive deals with them. I understand foreign policy isn't simple and cut and dry. There's nothing geopolitically that is an easy, cut and dry, simple solution. And there are many, many factors as to why and why nots and how nots and so many. But as like an individual, as like a human being, that all I care about is making sure other human beings are treated and respected. You know, human dignity, human decency, basic human rights. Like, it is simple to me. It's pretty cut and dry, right? For me, in my stances on these things, which I know is going way off the whole try to remain unbiased in the news thing. But once again, just like with Ukraine, it is the textbook definition of a genocide by the International Criminal Court's 1993 Rome Statute, which defines the crime of genocide according to the 1949 Geneva Conventions, which defines the crime of genocide. What is happening inside of Ukraine is genocide. It's not just crimes against humanity. It's not just a war crime. It is a genocide by definition. It's spelled out in very plain English. It's not legal speak. It's plain English. So that way you and I can know what that means. Your basic fundamental human rights of what is, you know, acceptable to do to people as a nation are also written in the exact same vocabulary and terminology in basic, very plain English. And if you don't speak English, a hell of a lot of other languages too. Because everything at the UN is translated to at least 2 other languages. I can look at the reports for anything from the United Nations, and right now, especially, so let's focus on Ukraine. English, French, Ukrainian, Russian. Like, come on. Human rights. Basic human rights. It's not hard. Treat people like people. It doesn't matter if they're Arab or Jewish or Israeli, or if they are, you know, it doesn't matter if they are, you know, Hindu or Muslim. It doesn't matter if they're Christian, atheist. It doesn't matter if they are Russian, Ukrainian, you know, British, American, you know, Mexican, Puerto Rican. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. No, all that matters is that are you breathing? Are you conscious? Are you considered the species of Homo sapiens sapien? Well, then you have human rights. It's the basic fundamentals of human rights. Big giant thing. It's like the whole basis of the United Nations. It's like the whole basis of the international tribunals that have occurred as a result of World War II. It is the basic fundamentals of pretty much every foreign policy that has been put forth since the end of World War II. Treat people like people. Be a good person. Even if you don't agree with something. Even if you don't agree with something. As a young child, you were taught the difference between what is right and wrong. And something that I was taught as a young child is that what is right is not always necessarily what is popular. Is it wrong to beat people with batons? Yes, it is wrong to beat people with batons. Is it wrong to attack people at random? Yes, it is wrong to attack people at random. Is it wrong to murder people? Yes, it is wrong to murder people. Is it wrong to burn someone's house down? Yes, it is wrong to burn someone's house down. Is it wrong to say nasty things about people? Yes, generally speaking, it is wrong to say nasty things about people. Is it wrong to lie? Yes, it is wrong to lie. These are basic fundamental principles I was taught as a 5-year-old. If not younger, because I would like to think my parents took some kind of responsibility. If that is the case, then is it wrong to demolish people's homes? Yes. As a state, it is wrong to demolish people's homes. Is it wrong to shoot and injure people and kill people? Yes. Especially when it's at a refugee camp. Yes. It is wrong. Is it wrong to bomb someone's homes into oblivion? Yes, it is wrong to bomb homes and towns and villages into oblivion. Basics. Is it wrong? And let me center on Moscow for this. Where's the Kremlin? Oh, fuck it, the whole city. Is it wrong to lie? Yes. It has always been wrong to lie. I mean, it's not hard. Have a moral compass, people. I don't care where you're from. This is the same reason why, if you've noticed in this chat, which, by the way, thank you guys very much for being a very awesome. I'm not saying you guys are like this, but for the most part, this community has been very awesome as we've built it, because I have been very blatant about how my opinion is towards dehumanizing people and demeaning people. And that includes Russians, even though we have definitely all have our personal opinions about the Russians and about the Russian government and the Russian soldiers. I don't allow the word, for instance, orc inside of my live chat. It will not be there. It will never be there. It's never been okay. It will never be okay. It will never be okay. I don't care what your opinion is. It is not okay to do that. That is degrading somebody. That's dehumanizing somebody. We're not going to do that here. I have personally had my issues with this. I personally had my issues with this when I came back home from the Middle East, especially after my first deployment, because it was a very rough one for me. It changed a lot. It changed my entire perspective on everything I knew about the world. Forget the Marine Corps, forget everything else, forget whatever else I had to deal with or whatever my views were before I went to Syria. Everything was completely different, and then I went to Syria and I came back and the whole world was new. Period. It was that deployment, that 4.5 months, was the defining period of my life. That was the moment. Yeah, that will always be the moment. That is the defining period of my life. And when I came home after seeing and going through everything I went through and everything I saw and everything I had to deal with, I was a very resentful, hateful individual. And I will be very open and honest about this. I said some things that I am not very particularly proud of. About a whole group of people. But I have grown since then. And I have learned. And I have come to think about these things. And had a lot of time to do so. To think about these things. To study. To learn. And come to the conclusion that I am very wrong in what I am saying and doing. So, if I can do it, then, and admit that I have done it and that I am wrong in doing it, then it shouldn't be hard for anybody else to. Governments are people. It's made of people. Politicians are people. I mean, it's not that hard of a concept. But I finally digress, and I continue now to move on with the actual news. Come up here to Idlib, where a U.S. strike in Syria has killed an Islamic State leader. The U.S. Central Command of the U.S. Armed Forces announced the death of one of the leaders of the Islamic State during a UAV strike in the Syrian province of Idlib. The statement refers to him as Ahmad al-Jabouri, who was responsible for planning attacks in Europe. He's developing the Islamic State leadership structure there for the Islamic State in Europe. And he says that ISIS continues to represent a threat to the region and beyond, according to General Michael Eric Kurilla. Pro-Turkish groups are fighting each other as conflict broke out in the city of Azaz between pro-Turkish militants and groups associated with the SNA and the HTS. During the battle, 2 local residents were killed and 6 more were injured. There are also losses among the fighting parties. The reason for the clash is not currently known, but reinforcements of the SNA were sent there to stop it.
ضربوا حشوة.
You know, it blows my mind I used to sleep to that. Despite the intervention of the SNA troops to stop the fighting in Azaz, clashes among the gangs continued into the morning, and due to the urban fighting, local residents are forced to leave their homes. The death of 2 pro-Turkish militants during the conflict has thus far been confirmed. You hear the lulls in the fighting there too. A really good depiction of what they mean by a lull in the fighting. That is a bongo truck, by the way. So if you ever hear me say the word bongo truck, this is what I mean. This truck right here is exactly what I mean. This little, this little truck right here. That is a bongo truck. That's what we call a bongo truck. So in case anyone ever hears me say that phrase, that is what I mean when I say bongo truck. Because that's the only way I know it. Technically, I think it's not technically a flatbed, but you can call it that. In Afghanistan, mudflows and floods can claim the lives of 21 Afghans. Over the past 2 weeks, mudfloods and floods have claimed the lives of 21 Afghans. The statistics were updated from Shafulia Rahimi, the official representative of the Ministry of Emergency Situations of the Taliban. 102 people have been so far injured, as well as 2,625 units of housing destroyed or damaged. 827 cattle have been lost, and 5.5 thousand hectares of agricultural land have been lost, along with all of the crops. Videos showed the streets of Faizabad at the center of the Badakhshan province. There's obviously quite a bit of flooding ongoing there. Down here, we see a 110-year-old madrasa and libraries, which set ablaze by a Hindu mob. The Hindutva mob set fire to the Madrasa Azizia, which is the oldest madrasa, which is a college for Islamic instruction and library of Bihar Sharif in Nalanda district of Bihar, on fire. The madrasa contained more than 4,500 books which were destroyed in the fire. The 110-year-old library was vandalized by the armed mob of around 1,000 people. The mob threw petrol bombs into the mosque and the library. Once again, what the fuck? Think of everything that madrasa has had to go through in 110 years. Just fundamentally just think about that. Once again, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what you believe in. Treat people like people. And another probably it's something else that should probably, may offend some people. I apologize. May not. Okay, because I think this makes some like common sense things here. If you're religious figures or what have you, or your religion or whatever you're dealing with calls for violence, you should probably be rethinking some things. I'm just going to point that out. Because there's extremism everywhere. Doesn't matter what religion or political ideology you're talking about. There is an extremist group in it. Okay? There is an extremist group, regardless of the ideology, religion, whatever, political, affiliation. There is an extreme end to that. It might be one person. It might be 100,000 people. There's an extreme end to it. No matter what you're talking about, ideologies are always going to be taken to the extreme, whether in single group or in single individuals or large groups. No in between. There will be always at least one that is more extreme and is considered extremist by all the others. If your ideology, political, religious, whatever, calls for violence, you should probably be rethinking what your beliefs are. If you are calling for the oppression or violence of other people, towards other people, there should be some very big, fundamental moral compass questions to be asked, no matter what it is. I even give my cats the same look. It's just, violence isn't okay. You can't just be a violent person. You know, I joke about it and I sneer about it because, you know, I know what I'm capable of doing. But, you know, I'm not a violent person. Never have really been a violent person. I can be capable of doing so, but as a kid growing up, I never was interested in violence, never wanted to get into a fight, tried to avoid fights, had to get in a couple as a kid, but never got into fights. Never got into fights as a kid, if I could help it. In the Marine Corps, obviously, you know, went into the infantry, and that was my one job, and I did get in some fights when I was in the Marine Corps, but that was the culture I was in. You know, that was the culture, that was what I was a part of, and that was my job. And so, at the end of the day, it was how a lot of things got settled. You know, but even then, I avoided them up until I just couldn't anymore, and I had to settle it then and there, so that way whatever was happening could end and we could move on and get to what needed to be done. And I have been very, very, very good about, since I got out of the Marine Corps, at my job, I have raised my voice one time and I have never screamed at anybody. I have raised my voice one time the entire 2 years that I have now worked at my job, in my position. I have raised my voice one time and I have never screamed or yelled at anybody. I have never gotten into a physical confrontation since I have been home, since I have gotten out of the Marine Corps. I am not a violent person, never have been. And sincerely, it is the last resort. There is never a time where I have decided that, you know, where I have not tried to do everything else that I thought was conceivably possible to try and avoid using violence. So active calls for it, no matter the ideology, are probably rather dangerous and should probably be questioned morally, because it's something I have to question morally. Tim Epps says, ooh, those dangerous libraries. I know, right? For the old books. Max asks me, Paul, are you religious? No, I am not religious. I used to be. I grew up in the United Methodist Church as a child, and I have studied and I have read and I maintain. I actually have a personalized Bible. I have a Book of Mormon. I have gone through the Quran. I've gone through the Torah. I have gone through all sorts of different texts and read all sorts of different things. I did a lot of that in high school. I was very interested. It's something I wanted to do. I wanted to read all of the major religious texts when I was in high school during my junior and senior year, because I wanted to learn about these things. Then when I went to the Middle East, I studied about Islam more. And if you've ever heard a good, like, someone that's vocally able to actually do a good adhan, always recommend it. One of the most beautiful things you can ever listen to is the adhan. That is from the morning and then again in the evening. They're called a prayer. absolutely beautiful, absolutely majestic and amazing, as long as the vocalist is good. Otherwise, it's, but, you know, there's something, you can't help but be moved spiritually in some way, shape, or form when you're there and you're in the middle of the desert, and all of a sudden, as if a chorus is going off or starting to sing in the middle of the open desert, as all of the mosques and all of the surrounding villages for everywhere in the region of the Middle East start singing their Hans simultaneously. That is an experience that cannot be described. That is something that, if you've never been there and never had experienced something like that, is very much worth going and experiencing at least one time. You may not like it, you may not understand what's being said, you may not care, but it's an experience that should happen at least once, I think, for everybody. I think that is a very cool experience. Not just the one mosque, but to have all of them at the same time going off. I think it's a very, very interesting experience to listen to that call to prayer. And likewise, I actually sang in a church choir instead of communion, ironically. But no, I am no longer I'm no longer religious. My experiences, once again, were the defining moment in my life, and that made me call into question a lot of things. And I have, seeing a lot of things has really shaken that, and has finally defined myself at this point as I'm no longer being religious. And that's just a personal choice. It's fine if you are. I think having something to ground you, regardless of what that happens to be, I think that is important. And if that happens to be whatever faith you choose, then I think that's good. I think that's a good thing, and I think it should be something worth pursuing. But if it is something that leads to violence, if it leads to something that is, as a person, if you have to question that, if you have to question these things, then you should. I think there is no grounding, there is no hard, grounding in anything that you can have, something that you've put a foundation on. Foundations crack, foundations break over time. They break down. Especially, in different, depending on where you might build it. But foundations can break down too. You look at old homes. And so I think it's worth noting that there's always, that regardless of what you center yourself upon, that it's important to also still maintain, regardless of what it calls for, to maintain a personal moral compass. I don't think, and taking the tactical pause and being willing to ask the next question. Don't ask if you ask the question, is this, is this okay? Yes or no? The answer is yes or no. You should still ask, but why is it okay? Why is it okay to do this? Or why is it not okay? Being willing to ask the next question and getting those answers, I think, or attempting to search for those answers, I think, are the important thing, one of the keystones in life of forward progression in any endeavor. Whether that be your career, whether that be your personal life, or your relationship, or your faith, or your what have you. I think that is, for forward progression, it's not just asking the question, but asking the next question, and playing chess, not checkers. Move on once again. 7 die in an avalanche. An avalanche hit a mountain pass and struck a road connecting the Nathula Mountain and the state capital of Gangtok. 6 vehicles and around 30 people were trapped under the snow. The bodies of 7 who have died have been found, and the other 23 have been rescued alive. About 80 more vehicles, including 350 people, were trapped on the route and are being rescued currently. So we can see that avalanche there. AP News, or the Associated Press. And there is a YouTube video attached with that as well. Coming down here into Papua New Guinea, the casualties are following an earthquake. A 7.0 earthquake at the depth of 63 kilometers hit Wawak City, including the East Sepik province of the Momes region in the northwestern of Papua New Guinea on the April the 2nd. At least 4 have died and 17 were injured as of April 4th. And about 300 houses were reportedly damaged across at least 23 villages. See a medical evacuation there. If you would like some more information on that, you can go and check out Reuters. Going over here and into Ethiopia. 29 people have died due to floods. Heavy rainfall since early March has led to overflow of rivers and flooding that has impacted multiple regions. Flooding has damaged homes, roads, bridges, and infrastructure. At least 29 people are reported dead, as well as in the Somali region. 240,000 have been affected or displaced, and disruptions due to flooding are currently still ongoing. There has been a 50% increase in cholera cases in Oromia and Somali regions, and moderate to heavy rainfall is still forecasted over the next upcoming 24 hours. If you'd like some more on that, reports the UNOCHA does have, or which is the UN Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, does have more information on that, as well as flood list and crisis 24 from Garda. Jumping across the Atlantic, we come down here and into Brazil, where a man kills 4 children at a Brazilian daycare. A man armed with a small axe has attacked a daycare in southern Brazil, killing 4 young children in a tragedy that Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva called a monstrosity. The attack occurred on Wednesday when a 25-year-old man scaled a wall of a private daycare in Blumenau, a city in the state of Santa Catarina. Once inside, he killed 4 children, estimated between the ages of 4 and 7, and injured several others. Police say the attacker has been arrested. While in Peru, update on the flooding and humanitarian needs due to the flooding. Multiple districts of Peru have declared a state of emergency following heavy rainfalls that led to the floods and landslides and casualties. 517,000 people have an urgent humanitarian needs, with 12,000 houses having been destroyed and 73,000 which have been damaged. 1,550 classrooms and 201 healthcare facilities were affected, destroyed, and uninhabitable. The UN and partners are assisting the region. It is estimated that $3.5 million USD is currently needed. If you'd like some more information, UNICEF as well as Relief Web International does have more on the situation. The second oldest orca in captivity is to be released after more than 50 years. The Miami Seaquarium star orca Lolita, who has spent more than 50 years in captivity, will soon bid adieu to her tiny tank in Florida and live out the rest of her days in her home waters of the Pacific Northwest. Lolita, known as Takete or Toki for short, is a 57-year-old female orca from the now endangered southern resident orcas that live off the coasts of British Columbia, Washington, and Oregon. She's currently the second oldest orca in captivity behind Corky, a 58-year-old male who resides at SeaWorld San Diego. Lolita arrived in Miami Seaquarium in 1970 after a group of men captured her and 79 other orcas at the cove of Wood Bay Island. Since then, Lolita has lived and performed tricks in the aquarium pool, which is the smallest of its kind in North America, until March 2022 when she retired from public shows. The decision to relocate Lolita to her home waters was announced on March 30th by a press conference. Jointly held at the Dolphin Company, which owns Miami Aquarium, the conservation group's Friends of Lolita, who have been campaigning for Lolita to be returned home since she retired. Lolita is too old to be successfully released into the wild, so she will be moved to a new sea pen where she will spend her retirement looking after looked after by trainers. And there she is. You'd like some more on that, then Life Science does have more for you. Coming out of Nashville, the vote to expel Democratic representatives has been scheduled. On Monday, Republican State Representative Buzz Hulsey, Gino Bolso, and Andrew Farmer filed resolutions aimed at booting Democratic State Representatives Gloria Johnson, Justin Jones, and Justin Pearson from leading state house protesters and gun control chants on the House floor last Thursday. Lawmakers joined thousands of people, including college students, high school students, and parents who demonstrated at the Nashville Capitol to call for more action on gun control after 3 children and 3 adults were killed in the Covenant School shooting. The vote will take place on Thursday, April 6, 2023 at 9 a.m. The expulsion vote is expected to be close to or along party lines, and if that happens, it'll be the first time since the 1800s and possibly ever that a vote to expel was not bipartisan. And the Tennessee Holler does have a thing here for you guys, as well as the Gloria J. Coming out of the Pentagon up here in Washington, D.C., $2.6 billion in USD for an aid package to Ukraine. The United States provided another aid package to Ukraine, splitting between a drawdown worth roughly $500 million and a $2.1 billion USD in USAI funds. Interesting new additions include 30mm gun trucks for destroying drones, refueling equipment, and bridging and support equipment, logistical support equipment, all with heavy emphasis on the logistical support of the Western systems that Ukraine has recently been receiving. It is believed these will be set for usage in Ukraine during their upcoming counteroffensive. We can see here quite the lengthy list today of stuff being provided, and we go down this list here. Additional munitions for Patriot air defense systems, additional munitions for HIMARS, 155 and 105 millimeter artillery, 120 millimeter mortar rounds, 120 and 105 millimeter tank munitions, 25 millimeter ammunition, 2 large optically tracked wire to command link guided missile or tow missile, approximately 400 grenade launcher with 200,000 rounds of ammunition, 11 tactical vehicles to recover equipment, 61 heavy fuel tankers, 10 trucks and 10 trailers to transport heavy equipment, testing and diagnostic equipment for support vehicle maintenance and repair, spare parts and other field equipment. Under the USAI, which means that they are getting, USAI means that they are buying, like the industry is going to build this stuff new for the most part, or they're going to replace systems. Additional munitions for the NASAMS, the 9 counter unmanned aerial system 30mm gun trucks. Reportedly, these will be the GAU. I've seen, supposedly, they might be putting the GAU on it. This is kind of, it brings some curiosity to me. 10 mobile counter-UAS laser-guided rocket systems, 3 air surveillance radars, 30mm and 23mm anti-aircraft munition, 130mm, 122mm artillery rounds, 122mm Grad rockets, which means that we're starting up a Grad rocket production line, which is interesting. Rocket launchers and ammunition, 120mm and 81mm mortar systems, raw. SK-81s, 120mm, 81mm, and 60mm mortar rounds, 120mm tank munition, Javelin anti-armor systems, Jaeger Raytheon, anti-armor rockets, precision aerial munitions, approximately 3,600 small arms and more than 23 million rounds of small arms ammunition, 7 tactical vehicles to recover equipment, 8 heavy fuel tankers and 105 fuel trailers, armored bridging systems, 4 logistical support vehicles, trucks, and 10 trailers to transport heavy equipment, secure communications equipment, satellite communications terminals and services, and funding for training, maintenance, and sustainment. Woo! That's a long-ass list. Damn. All right. So, basically, yeah. Basically, this is, you can see just how much is there for logistics. Everything from training, funding, maintenance, you know, lots of fuel trailers, lots of, because you think that's a lot, but when you put it into the perspective of how much it takes to run a military operation, you can't fathom. You cannot fathom how wasteful war is. War is unbelievably a wasteful experience. Not just, you know, just at the logistics side of it. Not even the whole moral waste of human life and things like that, but the logistical side of it. The physical, basic, what is needed supplies. For an Abrams tank to start its engines, not drive anywhere, to start its engine, it needs to burn 10 gallons of JP8 diesel fuel. Technically, it's an aviation fuel, but JP8. 10 gallons of fuel to start the engine of an Abrams. Which means that the Leopards and other vehicles are going to be very similar. Require similar specs. And sustainability. I mean, it's 10 gallons. So, all of these fuel trucks and fuel trailers and stuff, it sounds like a lot. But how many tanks are we sending to Ukraine? How many Leopards, which are also going to run on JP8? How many Challengers are also going to run on JP8? They require a large amount of fuel, an immense amount of fuel, which is an immense amount of logistics. And on the offensive operations, you're going to need a lot. And you need to have extras because you're going to lose some. They're going to break down because of the wear and tear that comes with, you know, using military service and their armor plating and stuff that, you know, the engines and transmissions have to make up for that they may not have initially been designed to deal with. I'm talking about you, the Humvee. And, you know, it's these kinds of things. You see the tanks. People see the tanks, and they see the Bradleys, and they see the rifles, and they see the TOW missiles and the javelins. But you don't think about all of the javelin missiles that have to be fired for every system. All of the ammunition, the magazines, the slings, the cleaning rods, the cleaning brushes. You know, you're going down the list of, you know, things needed for just a single company. A platoon to operate is immense. All of, you know, if you are going to properly outfit one person, if you're going to properly outfit, let's just do a single rifleman. I want you to think about what you have to get them. You have to get them a soft cover, probably a garrison cover of some kind. This doesn't include dress uniforms or anything. This is just battlefield fatigues and all of that. You have to get them, you know, a soft cover for the garrison, a soft cover for the field, a boonie cover. You have to get them a helmet liner, or helmet pads. You have to get them the helmet. You have to get them the helmet cover for the camouflage because that's a separate piece. You have to give, if they have nods, if they have NVGs that go on the helmet, you have to get them the NVGs. You have to provide batteries because they run on something. You have to have additional image tubes for when those things break. You have to have a rhino mount, an elbow mount. You have to have the mount plating that goes on here and the screw that goes in the center to hold it in place. Then you have their camouflage fatigue uniform, a camouflage fatigue Gore-Tex jacket or waterproofing jacket, their pants, the belt that goes with said pants, and then you have your boots with extra boot laces. You have the underwear, the undershirts, multiple changes of both, as well as your socks because you have to take care of your feet, plus the thing of combat boots with extra laces, plus dog tags to be able to identify that individual, and then we continue. That's just uniform items. Gloves, if you wanted, if you really are going fancy. Gloves, especially for the machine gunners to be able to operate with that. You're talking about you need to have a poncho liner or a tarp of some kind. You have to have, you know, the pad to go on the ground, the sleeping bag, probably the bivy sack that go with the sleeping bag. You have the rifle, you have the optic that goes with the rifle, you have the laser sight that goes with the rifle, a forward grip, a sling of some kind. You then also have 6 magazines, 180 rounds of ammunition, 2 hand grenades, the pouches. So 3 double mag pouches or 6 single magazine pouches, the dump pouch, the administrative pouch, MVG pouch, 2 grenade pouches, not a radio pouch if there's a squad leader or a team leader that needs a radio. Camelback pouch, hydration pouch, sustainment pouch, day pack or assault pack, plus the sustainment pouches for that. Canteens, usually at least 2. 550 cord because it's extremely useful. An e-tool or a small shovel. You have soft plates to go. You have the plate carrier, soft plates that go inside the plate carrier, rated for up to 9mm and 45 small handgun ammunition, usually NIJ level 2. Kevlar. Then you also have 2 hard plates, front and back, usually level 3 or level 3 plus or level 4. Then you also have side plates if you're properly outfitting them, which means you need the side plate pouches, which gives you side ballistic plates. And then you have their cleaning rods that go with a rifle, a bore brush, a chamber brush, T-angle cleaning rod, cleaning swabs, CLP for their weapon or gun oil, clean, lubricate, inspect oil. You have, I think I already said dump pouch, probably a tactical belt, body bag, 4 tourniquets, 1 for every limb, a thing of gauze, a burn bandage, packing bandage, usually an MPA or nasal phalangeal airway, band-aids, Sharpie for marking tea time and date, elastic bandage, pressure bandage, the IFAC pouch itself, needle decompression, body bag, plus or personal, what other stuff you're going to give them additional, for things like extreme cold weather or hot weather or whatever, because it's, once again, situational dependent, going back to a much earlier conversation. And that's just one guy. That's one guy to be properly outfitted for like one engagement. Because if he's doing multiple engagements, if he's out in the field, he's carrying extra, in the battle space, carrying extra ammunition. He's also getting ammo cans and stuff like that. You have to feed him, so food and water and fuel and batteries and Band-Aid, like it's, all of this stuff that you have to do to not, for one person in the field, properly equipped, and you have to sustain them. So logistics for just one person is an immense undertaking to properly outfit just one person. With our initiative, if we were able to outfit one person, oh, I forgot, gas mask and gas mask pouch plus the gas mask filters. If we could outfit just one person on our, through our initiative, like, that would be amazing. That in and of itself would be worth it. I'd like to do a lot more than that, but like operational guardian support, that's the kind of stuff we're supplying, not the weapon, but or the ammunition and stuff, but like the body armor plates and stuff. Because you can see how much of an immense undertaking that is, and why it's still a problem even after how much money has been spent, and how much has gone there, and how much aid has been provided. It is always a problem, because that's just one person. That's just one individual. Now think of how many thousands you have to outfit, and you have to outfit the police, and you have to outfit security services, and the rescue recovery services, and the firefighters now, and the border agencies. And reporters need this kind of stuff too. NGOs and nonprofits and stuff that are operating there need this stuff. So it's, it's an immense undertaking that cannot be overstated. And if you would like to know everything that the United States has sent to Ukraine, the most updated fact sheet from yesterday and the PDF has been provided here from the U.S. Department of Defense. But zooming out here, I think that is every bit of the hard-hitting news. We have our last couple of bits of news coming out of here. Something a little bit on the lighter side. The James Webb Telescope discovered the oldest black hole in the universe. That's terrifying. The James Webb Space Telescope spotted the earliest known black hole in the universe. The James Webb Space Telescope discovered a supermassive black hole, the mass of 10 million times the Sun, at the center of the baby galaxy, 570 million years after the universe began. If you would like to take a look at, or if you'd like to know more about that, go check out Live Science. And do remember, every time you're looking at like space, you're looking into the past, because that's how, when we talk about billions of light years, that's how long it had to travel here. It's not a distance, it's time. The deepest dwelling fish was spotted at more than 27,000 feet beneath the ocean surface. A ghostly white snailfish smashed the record for the deepest fish ever seen after it was filmed at more than 27,000 feet below the ocean surface. Scientists aboard the research vessel DSSV Pressure Drop stumbled across the snailfish while using a remotely operated submersible attached to a baited camera in the Izu Ogasawara Trench of the Western Pacific near Japan. Snailfish species is unknown, but scientists believe it belongs to the genus Pseudoleparis. It was spotted at a record-breaking depth of 27,349 feet, or 8,336 meters. The deep-dwelling snailfish, like the various record breaker of the genus Pseudoleparis, can withstand the pressure equivalent of more than 800 atmospheres, which is enough force to crush most living organisms. To do this, the snailfish has evolved without swim bladders, which are air-filled sacs that provide buoyancy to most fish species. They have also replaced their scales with a gelatinous layer that protects them from the crushing depths. Here we go. This is the fish. I just want to point out that there is apparently something that is also down here that is not this fish. Because very clearly, now he is right there at the bottom. But like there's something swimming here. It may not have been a fish, but it's certainly interesting. And this is the fish itself out of the water. I don't want to touch it. That just doesn't look like that. Like that just gives me like the. Yeah, no. Scientists can keep that. I'm good. Thanks, man. But other than that if you would like some more info, you can go and check out the article over there at Live Science. But that is everything on the news today. Now, obviously, I shared a lot of personal opinions on some of this stuff, and I know that a lot of people don't necessarily always agree with me on these things, and that's fine. I respect people's opinions. But the point of this channel, and what we're trying to do here is we're trying to do good for people throughout the world. We're trying to give back to people that are affected by these terrible news stories, by the things that are making the news, which is causing human suffering. And as someone that, I like to think I have a moral compass on some of these things. I try to maintain an unbiased opinion, and I try to maintain an apolitical opinion, and probably do pretty poorly about it. And I do apologize if that's how you feel about this, and because that is what we try and do. But this is, you know, I have to have a stance on some of these things. You can't watch these kind of things happen and not have a stance on them, I think. Because if you don't speak up, who's going to? You know, if you don't say something, who's going to? So, thank you for listening to my ranting tonight. Thank you for jumping in here. Some pretty interesting questions, some unusual ones, some personal ones, and some, you know, very in-depth ones. So pretty awesome. Nice diverse questioning list of questioning tonight. I hope that you guys maybe not enjoyed, but I hope that you found this knowledgeable, and I hope that, you know, these kind of situations have encouraged you to, you know, help people throughout the world. And if you would like to, you can donate at any of the different links at the donation or in the description below. 70% or more of all the donations that those organizations do receive go directly to their programs. And we also have our own initiative listed down there if you guys would like to help us try and get something and do a little bit of good through the channel. That'd be awesome. And so if you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, that's okay too. Help us spread the word, bring some awareness to these situations, and help us try and have a bigger impact in the world, giving us those likes and subscribes, sharing our stuff amongst different friends and communities and family. It's really how this channel has grown, continues to grow, and it's really, you know, we want to reach as many people as possible and do as much good as possible. So thank you for allowing us to do that. Thank you for the support you've given us and the other organizations. And I hope to see you back here on Friday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central, for another 48 hours of news and review. In the meantime, I hope that you, your family, and your friends remain safe, and if not, I do hope that you find that safety and security in the very near future. My name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your night, everybody. Bye now.
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всі хвосту змішаємо з багном. Відстріляно волноваги і чудно кличі діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Нам не треба ні конфлікту, ні війни. Та ми готові всіх вас слать до сатани. Тисячі вже полягло, і все більше шлейфуйло. То для них нема нічого, крім труни. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Відстріля до волноваги і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Вызволять пришел, братишка, ну привет. На моей земле тебе один ответ. Нашим людям с кирпичом, даже танки и бачок. Вам не взять нас и за 100 000 лет. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Відстріля до волноваги і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО.
Mr. Putin, on behalf of all our guys, no one's scared of your nuclear device. You can take your top 11, shove it up your wrinkled bum. Who will come and help you fit it in your skull?
Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Відстріля до волноваги і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Відстріля до волноваги і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Відстріля до волноваги і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Gone home, Russian soldiers, gone home. Бо ми всіх вас тут змішаємо з багном. Відстріля до волноваги і чудно кличе діти нахуй. Тут працює ЗСУ і ТМО. Ідіть нахуй.